Okay, so we are at 5 minutes past the hour and we are recording. So hello and welcome everyone to the Gotta Check the Date, Thursday, 28th of July, Securing Critical Projects Working Group meeting. Looks like we'll have a pretty light crowd today, which is totally okay. Jeff sends his best, and I know David wanted to join as well, but is not feeling well. So we can just dive right in. Since we'll have maybe a little extra time, I'd love to see if this is either anyone's first time or kind of as we get started, anyone would like to let us know how you're doing and share any updates with us. Anyone want to volunteer for that?
Yeah, hi everybody. I think it's my first time in this particular group. So my name is Alvaro Figueroa. I'm from Costa Rica, and I'm currently working for Microsoft. So hi everybody.
Cool. Hello and welcome, Alvaro. I've heard so many amazing things about Costa Rica. It seems like a really beautiful country. A lot of natural beauty.
Everybody's welcome. So yeah.
Nice. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do.
Just a quick introduction, Christine Abernathy, and I'm with F5 Open Source Program Office, and I believe this is also my first time in this working group.
Hello, Christine. Yes, I've seen you in other working group meetings. Thank you so much for joining this one.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. Cool. So yeah, so we'll do as much as we can today, and if we need to conclude a little early, that's okay. So the first thing we do have on the agenda is Jeff did take the time to create a poll. I believe it's yes, it's a Google form to help us determine the best time for the APAC friendly meeting time that we are trying to incorporate into our regular meetings. So please fill out the form, and hopefully once we get a good idea of when works best for the most folks, we'll likely be switching to an alternate type meeting where we'll do one meeting, kind of the regular time that we have been doing, and then the alternating will be an APAC friendly time zone. So yes, please fill that out and let us know what you think. Okay, next we have, and thank you so much for joining today, Randall. Just to provide some context, in the last meeting, we had talked about, this ingestion engine and this process for capturing and identifying projects that are deemed critical, and talking about what the best kind of platform for that would be. And we had discussed the possibility of using GitHub, just because it is being used for other types of processes like that, and could be a good way to track changes and to basically see how it evolves over time. We had talked about moving that over to GitHub, of which Randall volunteered to do a little bit of research and kind of explore that as an option. So with that, if it's okay with you, Randall, I will hand off the mic, and we'd love to hear what came out of that.
Thanks, Amir. Yeah, actually quite a bit. There's quite a bit of interest, and I actually got Homebrew quite involved because they actually have analytics already kind of pre-deployed. So I've started kind of containerizing everything, and I talked to Allison, I think it was yesterday, from GitHub Labs, their security lab, and we're kind of collaborating and putting that repository together. We're still containerizing all the tools to make them run on GitHub Actions. And then basically the way that we have it kind of envisioned is you should be able to make a PR and just add a name to the list, and it should automatically trigger the checks and put those with the PR. So when whoever's going to come in to merge that into the list, he will have all the output of the tools already put together and attached to the PR as far as notability goes. We can add more checks to those if we wanted to. It kind of depends on like what do we want to do from the security angle. But right now we're really just focused on measuring popularity, downloads from different package managers, things of that nature. And a lot. I've already contacted the criticality score team, and we're kind of working with them too and putting that container together and adding some other features and whatnot.
Wow, awesome. Wonderful. Could you give us a really kind of, if you've thought about it yet, and this is certainly open to discussion with the work group too, kind of how that looks from a process standpoint, or how that would look, or how we'd like it to look?
It would literally be something where you could even write on GitHub, you would be able to just add a name to the list. So in other words, there will be lists kind of for every ecosystem that we want to cover. And you would be able to just add a name to that list even directly on GitHub. We think that's probably the easiest way to do it. Because if you do it on GitHub, it doesn't even require you pulling down the repo or doing anything like that. And we're kind of basing it a lot on the change set tool from JS. And yeah, that's basically what it does. You just add a change log and it detects it and it executes from there.
I see. And can I ask, because we've talked about this a lot in both OpenSSF meetings and just in general of I'm certainly okay with using GitHub as a tool for this. Would it exclude, let's say, projects that aren't on GitHub, or let's say not active on Git, or not as active on GitHub? Because a lot of concerns we've gotten in the past is being too GitHub centric. So as long as, I see both sides, right? I mean, if GitHub has these tools and these things that we can use that will make the process more effective, then great. Of course, we want that. But at the same time, we want to be inclusive and not necessarily exclude projects that, let's say, don't use GitHub or aren't on GitHub. And oh yeah, and Eric brought up a good point too, that some companies could even block GitHub access. So is it possible to still be inclusive of, let's say, projects that aren't on GitHub?
I think that's something I would probably have to bring up with the criticality team, because I think that most of our current tooling does kind of like play off GitHub a whole lot. I do know that it is supported. However, not all the checks are supported, but I don't know as far as what the roadmap is. I know that GitLab is pretty well supported as well. And I know a lot of open source projects prefer GitLab for whatever reason, but I could definitely bring that up with the criticality score team, because I think that is more on their side, because I don't really know even what we could necessarily do. Like if you wanted to host on SourceHut, which is run by one of the Wayland maintainers, or the Wayland maintainer, like, the SourceHut is it's a nice tool, but it's extremely primitive. So, I don't know how they would necessarily handle that. Not to mention what APIs are available for us to get that information from. I know GitLab has done a lot to try to have a lot of like one-to-one APIs with GitHub, but I can bring that up next time I talk to them on Slack or whatever. I can definitely bring it up.
Okay, because and this is something maybe we can all work together as a group too, to really kind of finalize and formalize. But is kind of
another idea could be the checks could really be more of a suggestion. So in other words, if you do add a project that the checks might not be able to pick up, then I think at that point maybe we could add it somewhere where that doesn't necessarily disqualify you. It just makes it harder for us to verify how critical this project is.
Yeah, because because if kind of the high level intention is, just to have a method or a process to capture the community's thoughts and research on, what are these projects, then I mean, I don't see why we can't use GitHub as just the tool for it. But I think we should really make sure that we're not being exclusive, or maybe excluding, smaller projects or projects that are not on GitHub. If the mechanism is really just to use GitHub as again, like as the tool to generate these lists and to help make that more efficient, then I'm certainly all for it. But yeah, I would just really want to make sure we don't exclude
The
anyone.
reason that GitHub has a lot of this power is because they have a lot of tools integrated, like GitHub packages. You could use it as a container registry. And I think like with GitLab, it shouldn't be a problem because they kind of have the same thing going on. But I think when you start getting into like Gitia, or I think it is pronounced, and like those open source projects like Fabricator, for example, that doesn't have that. I think there's still ways of making that work, but I think from like a tooling perspective and priorities perspective, because I know that a lot of the tooling projects are running low on people. I don't know how much of a priority those are going to be. So I would probably just stick that our checks do not disqualify anything or anyone. They're just there to assist, because even if it is a smaller project, I'm assuming that we would need some sort of framework to do our due diligence and a manual perspective.
Yeah, one thing I will maybe caution a little on is, the objective is to capture information, right? We're trying to identify projects, and I'm certainly all for, like you said, using tools and certain things to help support that, or to provide reasoning or justification. Um, Darn, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, but to not be, this is really to help identify projects, and maybe not so much to do like a deep dive analysis into the projects themselves. So I think maybe walking that fine line between the two.
So let me ask this. So like at Homebrew, we have what we call a notability requirement. Now, I don't know if you also know this, but Homebrew, in other words, is run by GitHub. Because the project lead is employed by GitHub. So, but we have like a notability type of thing that we check, because we can't carry everything. It's really hard to carry everything. So is that kind of what we're going here for? Like the projects need to be notable, I'm assuming, to be considered critical to some degree, right? Because the reason I say that is because the criticality score does actually, like, the criticality tool does actually pop out a score. Like Astro and JS is at a 69, which is highly debatable. So this is the other thing about it too, that I don't think that all of these tools are, like 100% should be taken with, like, I think they all need to be taken with a grain of salt no matter what, because it is still an opinion, in my
Correct.
from my point of view. So
Correct. Yes. And yeah, so I think, yeah, so if someone can let's say nominate a project, if it can automatically, let's say, pull their criticality score as a selection criteria, or of a reason why that should be on that list. So kind of going along with that, in the notes sheet underneath some of the notes I've been taking, I recopied and pasted kind of some of our discussions from last week, of kind of like how that would look, and kind of what the structure would be like. And I have started on this kind of template to help showcase some of that. But I think something that's really important from this is going to be, that you have, a space to let's say nominate a project. I nominate Homebrew, for example. We talked about like an optional, way to categorize said project, whether that, so whether it's like a framework or a language or what have you. And then I think the really important piece, which I think is going to be critical for kind of how we set up this process, is basically the rationale or selection criteria. So like why someone would, why this, how you would justify, let's say, homebrew, for example, being on this list of projects, and why, that should be justified. So I'm certainly open. I'd love to get the rest of the group's thoughts on this of, what is kind of the key information to both capture as well as to showcase as part of kind of curating this list of projects. Does anyone have any immediate thoughts, Randall or anyone else in the group?
Well, immediately, what I would like to just point out real quick, I deal with a lot of JS because I currently have a job at Astro. But that being said, like in all honesty, like I think this is easy to or like OpenSSF and what we're implementing is a lot easier to implement when it's not JS. But as soon as you hit JS, I think it's a problem, and because there's a lot of young developers that don't necessarily understand why you need security. They're more about productivity than security. So the reason I'm saying this is because I'm bringing this to the attention of a lot of people like Ryan at Solid and Fred at Astro and a lot of these big names that are all Rich Harris also at Vercel, and I can't pronounce his framework's name, but but the reason I'm saying that is because I think that if we can align with the criticality score tool, or at least communicate with them so that at least from an OpenSSF perspective, the word critical or criticality is somewhat unified. So like it's not like we have two different definitions and two different working groups. I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah. And I think that is that's relatively easy to do, right? Where if someone, let's say, puts in a GitHub package link, that can automatically be cross-referenced to its criticality score, and then that can be basically auto-generated. So as soon as I
haven't seen this type of hostility in any other group I've worked with, but with JS specifically, you get a lot of opinions, to not say something else. So I would caution, because the criticality score, in reality, if we're going to call a spade, is somewhat very opinionated on how they actually generate that criticality score. So yeah, you get my point?
I do, yes. Exactly. And again, I think this all goes back to really what our objective is, which I think we did a pretty good job at our last meeting, kind of putting that into words in a pretty succinct way. Let me see if I could find it. Yeah, so we said our reasoning was to provide a best effort analysis of quantitative and qualitative research in the open source ecosystem and generate a curated living set list of projects deemed critical to organizations and individuals. So going along with that, I think it's like we're providing something that, we did some work on, and then the key is really how the receiver of that understands that and builds on that. You know what I mean? I think we're trying not to be too prescriptive, and that like, these are absolutely, without a doubt, the most critical projects in the open source ecosystem.
The pushback that I got from JS is that there's a lot of things that we're scoring right now, and this also is part of like the best practices thing as well. I brought it up in that working group. There's a lot of things that just they don't really apply to JS, because JS is its own animal. Like they don't have they have some like a dynamic analysis tool kind of, but like they really don't. Like
Right.
they had one, it's just nobody used it. And like, for example, like I know that in best practices, that's something they get scored on. And I know that in criticalities, there's some certain scoring criteria that doesn't apply to every ecosystem. And I've gotten pushback on like, well, we can't like fit these guidelines because we just don't even have the tooling for it. So I think that that's why I'm saying that like criticality score is good, but it is opinionated. And that being said, I think with what we're trying to do, I don't think that criticality score is a 100% fit. I think we can simplify that quite a bit.
Well, again, I think we're not trying to do, I don't think really any, I mean, sure, there is some analysis involved, but the objective of this is to essentially capture capture a list of projects. So I don't think we're necessarily, we can, I think every identified project should have to have a justification or selection criteria, and that could be the criticality score. Ideally, you would want, more than one selection criteria, maybe, two or three, to justify, why a project should be on that list. But I want to shy away from maybe doing too much of our own, maybe our own analysis or our own, scoring, so to speak, of, in terms of, this isn't necessarily a ranking. I think we were really clear to use the term set instead of lists. And I'm trying to make that more of a habit that, this is just a set. It's not a prioritized, list of things. It's just things that have been identified, through this process.
Sure.
So, so with that, I mean, I'd really love to, if any thoughts have come up, or if there's any feedback from anyone else in the work group. Alvaro, I'm sorry to call on you, but given it's you're fresh, I'd love to hear, maybe some of your initial thoughts
Yeah.
or perspectives.
Yeah, no problem. I do agree that the criticalization score is a bit opinionated, but I've seen the source of the tool. I actually plan to speak a little bit about in the next security tooling meeting. And yeah, it's a the tool is designed to try to be as objective as possible. And when it's not, it can be modified as any tool. So if there's anything missing from the JS perspective, it can certainly be added to it. One thing that I would like to see in that particular tool is, for example, if a certain software has a presence on distributions. So maybe I could add some code to that tool to add a little bit to the score based on that. But yeah, for the type of work that that this work group is doing, yeah, thinking of it as a set, it's quite important versus a list. So yeah.
Okay.
Actually, as far as myself, let's did a great job on defining more or less objective criteria on what actually is defined as being critical, and the aim of the project was exactly to make this process less subject to opinions. And what happened to all the job done? I'm a little bit.
So I heard a little bit, and you were breaking in and out. Do you mind maybe trying that, saying that again and seeing if we can hear you better?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is it better now? Hello? Is it better now?
Little bit.
Well, I'll make it quick. Last year, we did a big job on defining a set of objective criteria just to make this process of selecting critical projects less opinionated. And I wonder what happened to that job and why we're all over again discussing how it's all subject to opinions.
Do you have a link to that?
I think I can try to find it, but we had a pretty large Google spreadsheet with concrete examples and with criteria as well.
Oh, yes. You're referring to our first iteration of
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and I expected this to be like the iterative process. So we take what we learned from the first iteration and taking it further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So that does still exist. So we do still have, based on our first iteration, the Google sheet of the projects that we were able to identify. I think we have something like 100 projects. Yeah, we have 100 projects on there. I think because, and again, I think we did a fine job with that, in that, we were able to come together, do some discussion, do some type of curation and come up with a list. And I think that general idea is still the same. Like, that's what we want. And we want to have a living set, meaning that, these things could be changing all the time. So a way to iterate, I think, is very important. And some great lessons from that exercise, I think, were, um, being really clear on what the selection criteria are. So I think we did a fine job of, naming some of the most common selection criteria that we had, such as, criticality score, census program too, if it was identified as part of that research, survey responses. We want to curate this information, right, and get feedback from the community. So we did that, as well as other type of like research, like Docker pull count data and what have you. And I do think overall we did a fine job, and I think what we're trying to do now is similar to that. I think the goal is really just to do it in a slightly more, I guess, structured way, or maybe a more well-defined way, so that we can do it on a larger scale too. So it's, not just, our group, saying what we think the most critical projects are, but having a process that can give us an idea of, what the whole community is thinking, and curate on that.
Okay, but actually, in my opinion, the set of criteria we developed along with the concrete list of projects was the most important thing of that process. So it's not about the concrete project, it's about the criteria. And I guess we have this list at least half baked, so we can reuse it in a pretty big part.
Yes. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And selection criteria, I think we can certainly have, a couple of really common ones, but the point, I think, is that we should be considering as much data, and as much insight as we can. So if someone comes in and recommends a project, let's say that's an edge case, or wouldn't come up on a tool, or anything like that, we want to be able to hear from them, and we want them to be able to nominate a project and say, this might not come up on a criticality score, but because of X, Y, and Z, this project we think should be considered, and to be able to do that in a way where anyone can do it, ideally, anyone in the community or anyone in the OpenSSF, I think will be really important. And that's really what we're trying to hammer out. But it's a really hard thing to do, especially because, as you said, there are a lot of opinions, there's a lot of different opinions, and so I think we just have to do our best effort. And one thing I try and bring to the table is really trying to focus on, well, what can we have as a deliverable? So, as we're talking about this start, even if it's a MVP, a very loose thing, something that we can build on, and improve. So that's why we were talking about, if we were able to move some of this, instead of a Google sheet, move some of this over to GitHub, which is, I think a little more accessible in terms of, like, with the Google sheet, it was just, I think it was just shared with the work group and people who requested access to it. And, if they weren't actively involved in what we've been doing, they would have no idea that we even did this. So I think being on GitHub could potentially be a good way to have a platform, like a place people can go to, like a repo or what have you, and be able to participate and do this process.
No, I agree with the GitHub proposal. I was just talking that we could use that list of criteria and maybe compose a list where you can put it on GitHub and go this criterion check, this one check, and that's how we assess the criticality score of a project. just to make it less opinionated and more like objective.
Absolutely, yeah. And so then if we have, let's say, so I asked this to the whole group and specifically to Randall because he did some of the research, or he did all the research on this. If we have, let's say, the on our GitHub repository that, you know, things go in, recommendations, what have you, and then we have this set, you know, that's also viewable and accessible. How would we, like, how would that look in terms of really kind of curating it? Meaning, you know, is it just going to be like maybe one table that's constantly being updated that, you know, the other parts of the repo feed into? I'm almost, I'm also
that's-
wondering if we could just maybe try making like a really basic MVP on repo on GitHub. But yes, again, open question. Randall, you were saying something and I interrupted. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, that was the idea, because basically we can, like, so for someone that doesn't want to contribute and just wants to see the list, we can format the list in Markdown and they can actually like really kind of see it in all its glory. So yeah, we can make tables, we can do, that's actually one of the nicer things about this, is that like if you did want to go into, let's say, the Golang folder and then into frameworks, and then you could see all those, like, or maybe frameworks itself would be the markdown. It would just be a matter of structuring, but there's definitely a smart way of structuring where yeah, like it could definitely be very well presented and very open for contribution. So now as
Okay.
far as curation, I'm pretty sure that what's going to have to happen is that there's going to be a set of people that will have merge privileges, pretty much like any repo. And it would just be a matter of those people making sure that they stick to it. Like, you know, whatever we say, like, hey, you know, we're saying don't pay attention to criticality, which is not what I'm saying, but I'm just throwing it out there. Then we just have to make sure they follow that, you know, and they use those as suggestions, not as guiding principles.
Mhm.
That being said, let me ask this. I know that in our original proposal, we said 100 projects. So is that subject to change? So in other words, can it actually grow beyond 100 projects?
I don't see why not. Yeah, I think 100 was just a nice round number that, you know, everyone kind of agreed on.
And
But
there's no ranking in order of anything, right? It's basically just
correct. Yeah, for the time being, step one is really just to kind of get the information, and then step two would ideally be maybe if there's a way to chop it or prioritize it. Yeah. But I think first things first, we want to just have an output of identified projects identified as critical, some, you know, reasoning, and I think that's really it, you know.
one of the things I wanted to just say, and I don't want to point fingers, but I did catch a couple of people trying to gain the criticality score. So I'm also trying to avoid that.
Like get access to the repo, you mean?
No, like try to increase or put up certain things and do certain things so that their critical, specifically so that their criticality score would improve. Because they think that like the criticality score actually has some significant meaning where it really doesn't. So yeah, just because of the fact that nobody wants to be the guy in the lowest guy on the totem pole. And as I said, like a lot of the JS developers I work with, they don't understand like the actual principle. They just see a low score and I need to improve this. So yeah, that I think avoiding that I think is also important, because if we're going to be putting a set together, and I like the word set more than list, I think that we should avoid, you know, any ordering or ranking or any, because that would just incentivize people to game the system.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. So then I think what I'll take an action item then, because I am still working on this template. which may or may not end up being used. But I think what'll be what's important is really the data points. So I'm gonna draft up a couple of templates for us to go over and finalize hopefully in our next meeting. And what I mean by templates is just, yeah, some of that really basic stuff. So, you know, what are kind of the main data points that we want to capture, and kind of basic idea of what that would look like. I definitely love the markdown table idea, at least as one thing, just to kind of be able to see everything in one place, you know, nicely. And and then, yeah, going back to your question, I think since it's a set, I think maybe 100 could be just like a general guiding, you know, number. But if it's a little more, a little less, I don't think that'll necessarily be a problem. So I think as long as it's not overwhelming, like there aren't thousands of projects on there.
I think that we should stay away from setting a number, because they said that's going to just further drive competition. If somebody gets knocked off the list, then there's going to be that whole, you know, thing going on. Because there's always going to be people, oh, I should be on the list, and then I got knocked off the list. I think that not having a set number is a safer route for us to avoid, you know. I agree with you. And maybe there could be criteria in what you're putting together. You know, if there hasn't been an update in a year or a year and a half, you know, that could be subject for you to get removed off the list. You know, even if the project was really critical when we put it on there, you know, somewhere down the line you lost interest, or someone lost interest, and that's what happened. So maybe we could have a retired list, or I don't know, we could figure it out. But I think that, and also, Amir, with the templates that you're coming up, we can put those in a PR. So in other words, like if people wanted to like just say, hey, I don't host on GitHub or GitLab, but I want to manually provide like links that show how critical of a project I am for this, you know, ecosystem, then they could definitely do that, and that will be on the PR as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think I'll create a Google form as just the oh man, my brain isn't working. I'll create a Google form basically that'll help us, that'll help guide that. And if we use specifically that form, great. If we just take the elements of it and put it into GitHub, that's great too. So I'm curious, I'm not to call people out, but because I know I've in the identifying security threats working group, and I've been in many meetings with Christine, and I know that Christine's working on the metrics dashboard, and you have some insight into, you know, how this output, one of the ways this output is meant to be used in terms of, you know, informing other initiatives like Project Alpha. Do you have any kind of initial thoughts based on kind of what we've been talking about today and what our goals are, and maybe some tips or things that could help us with accomplishing what we're trying to do?
Just kind of like jumping in. I've basically been in listening mode, trying to like figure out what this kind of fits in with the other working groups. So I don't know if I have like anything more to add. I definitely like the part where you're talking about making it a set versus a list, not to have as much competition. So it's I guess it's going to be just a question from what I've been doing in identifying security threats, been focusing more on the metrics and the dashboard. So it's just like, it could be just extra data points that could be used in this system. But beyond that, probably not that much more to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. Do we have any other thoughts from the group?
Yeah, I do have a quick question. So, and kind of naming you as well. So from the OSTF, TIF, you guys need a list to actually know where to put the money, and the people from Alpha Omega, in a similar way, they also need a set. Let's call it a set to actually know where to start working and where to put their time. Are those two organizations are going to use this same list, or do they have their own separate list, or what's the idea behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically with us, and when I say us, I mean OSTIF, OSTIF. We typically will go and do the projects that are that we get funding to do, basically. So we don't have enough funds yet to really go out and just do projects on our own. We, for example, Google said, hey, do a couple of projects, and we're auditing those projects. That being said, I did create um, a short list, really, to be another data point. I created a short list that's really OSTIF's 50 projects that we think should be audited, basically. So it's like our list of recommendations. I'd like that to be another data point, basically, because we've done some analysis on our end and came up with this list of projects. And I know Project Alpha, I don't think they're really, I think they're mostly relying on the efforts of this working group to kind of have their own version of that list. But yes, so to kind of help with this effort, we also have created a list of projects to audit, which are a list of 50 projects that we recommend for auditing. And I do actually intend on presenting that to more folks in the OpenSSF, in particular the TAC and governing board, just to get feedback and to see if we're on the right track, and seeing if by offering like a menu or like a list of projects, if that's something that would help organizations who might have more interest in certain projects than others, to help them prioritize those projects or maybe even fund work for those projects. But yeah, but to answer your question, I'd say yes. At OSTIF, we're trying to also be a data point too, in that we do audits all the time. That's kind of what we specialize in. So we could be at least an opinion in the space where we could say these are important projects that should be audited.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. We still need to figure out a little bit, and this is in response to Christine's comment. Yeah, I think we're still fine-tuning kind of how the Google group and the access and stuff works. I think right now, Jory, actually, if I'm remembering correctly, you can auto join the Google group for this working group, which will give you access to the document. Does that ring a bell to anybody? I think we talked about this last week, and I'm not remembering, but I believe you can request access.
Yeah, I had to add it myself just before the meeting to get access to that. So yeah.
Okay. Did you do that in
I use
Google Groups?
I use my personal account instead of the Microsoft account, but yeah, you can add yourself to it.
Okay.
The trick is personal account. Okay.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. Wow.
And I could add you if necessary. So to the attended list.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Excellent, excellent. So, okay, so some things that I'm going to take back and have for the group by next meeting is some basic templates that we could build on to kind of help structure this. With that, I'd love to open. We have 10 minutes left if we want to do 5 minutes for any updates or folks we haven't heard of in a while. I see a couple people joined a little later. So yeah, open floor. Looks like we already have a volunteer. Wonderful. Hey, Naveen.
Hey, Mayor. One of the things that I wanted to I was thinking is the not the criticality score, the other project. I'm going blank. The
Security scorecards.
not the score. No, I'm talking about the one Caleb works on. I'm going blank.
Oh,
The
I'm blanking too.
analysis. The the analysis. That information is there in the Google bucket. Somebody already asked for if the Google bucket is great because and it dumps everything as a JSON. One of the things is at least scorecards right now is going to do HTTP REST endpoint, especially with the Google bucket. The best part is just tagging a domain name would give a REST endpoint should be able to give everyone the data. That'll be a great option. I was going to write that up as an issue, but I also thought this will be a good forum to come and talk if Caleb was going to be here today. I know he's not going to be here today.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a great point to bring up. Hopefully, once we have our APAC friendly meeting finalized, where we're going to try and alternate to be more inclusive of folks in other time zones. I'm fairly certain, because Caleb is in Australia, he'll probably start joining that one.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think that's a great point. And if anyone else has thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I think Caleb would be the best person to talk to about that.
I'll go ahead and write that up as an issue. I'll also post in the notes so that we can track about that. So essentially, it's going to give this got going back to this phenomenal data in that. But people, if there's a static HTTP endpoint where people can be like, oh, I can go to package analysis, OSSF package analysis, and all of a sudden they can get the data, and that'll be a great for others to consume this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Naveen. Do we have any other updates or thoughts from the group?
Maybe if anyone wants to let me know if they're interested in collaborating in the repo to, send me their info and I can get you added and you can kind of keep attuned to what's going on.
Absolutely. Which repo are you referring to?
Right now, basically all I've been doing is it's on my personal GitHub. It's one of the many things I have, but right now I'm focusing on packaging up pretty much all the tools that we're going to use in the pipeline for the analysis. And then we're going to run GitHub Actions, I think tomorrow. And then from there, just to do like a test of how it would run. And then next meeting, I could have that for you guys. I could probably even put together like a demo so you could see how it runs in real time on just give it a package and see what happens.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
If you want to add that as an action item, I can do that.
Let's see. Future topic ideas. Okay. Okay. So yeah, we'll hopefully, yeah, I would say even if it's an extremely simple demo like screenshots, that would be really helpful, and then we can collaborate on that, and hopefully then I would say, yeah, by the next meeting I'll have some like really basic templates and stuff that can help with kind of structuring.
Also maybe you could think about, because you said that you were thinking of like a file hierarchy, if you could think about or how that would work, at least from a basic level, so that way we could at least not just random markdown files.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, looks like we've got about 5 minutes left, so we can get a couple minutes back in the day. Want to thank everybody. Randall, thank you for taking the time to do some of that that intro research and using GitHub, and I look forward to seeing how that develops. And yes, we're certainly looking forward to working together as a group on this effort, and hopefully, I'd love to by the end of August maybe have like something that we can present to the TAC or further wide. So thank you all again. See you all in 2 weeks. If you'd like to take the conversation to Slack, feel free to do that. Or if email is preferred, you could just email the group. But yeah, again, thank you all so much for participating today, and I look forward to talking to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Amir.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah,
Guys.
of course. Thank you. Bye.